Okay, so we're going to do the circular flow model. Um, in order to do the circular flow model, there's going to be two actors involved, households and firms. And they interact in two completely different or separate markets, at least in theory. The first market is what's called the factor or the resource market. And this is the market where firms go to get the resources that they need to make the goods and services that are eventually sold. So the theory goes that households supply to the factor market four things: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Now, one way that students remember that is this idea. They use the acronym CELL for capital, which technically is capital stock, and that's the stuff that we use to make stuff. So think factory equipment. It also could be infrastructure, things like freeways, bridges, airports, things like that. Entrepreneurship. This is the leadership or the ownership of the factors of production. Some economists leave entrepreneurs in the circular flow diagram, some don't. Some consider them a factor of production, others don't. I honestly don't have a strong feeling either way on that, but I'll put it in there for now. And then the last two factors are land and labor. So these four things are the factors of production that households sell in the factor market to firms. Okay, so that's now in return for that, firms are going to pay money. And that money finds its way back to households. Now the money, and I'm going to put this in green because we're talking about money. So for capital stock, we'll call it interest. For entrepreneurship, we call it profit. For land, we call it rent. And for labor, we call it wages. You can call it whatever you want. It's dollars that are going from firms to households to pay for the factors of production. So that's one side of the circular flow diagram. On the other side, there's another market, and it's called the product market. And this is the market that most of us are familiar with. It's where we go to buy the things that we use day to day in our households. So firms are going to supply the goods and services that eventually find their way into our homes, and households are going to pay for that once again with money. And so what we see is, and that's why it's called the circular flow diagram, money going one direction and either the factors of production or goods and services, once the factors are converted, going the other direction. Now, there are okay, so if you think about it, do households spend every dollar that they have on the product market? And the answer is no. They don't. There's at least three other major things that households spend money on. So let me put this in a different color. I'll use purple. So the three things are, and I'm gonna go like this, and then we'll split it. Collectively, these are referred to as leakages. They're leakages from the system. The circular flow diagram would otherwise be a closed system, but there are these leakages. And the leakages are savings, taxes, and spending on imports. Now, what happens though is that these three items will find their way back into the circular flow diagram. How do they do that? Savings becomes investment. Taxes become government spending. I'm just going to write spending here, but it's government spending. And spending on imports becomes spending on exports. So, you know, when I buy, let's say, speakers made in Japan, that is a leakage from the system. My household spending is moving out of the system. But presumably Japan at some point is going to buy some export from the United States, and that money finds its way back into the circular flow diagram. So somehow that money is going to find its way back in. Now, I'm showing it as going in the sort of here in the cycle. That may or may not be true. It could enter anywhere in the cycle. But I'm showing it there just graphically. That makes the most sense. And when the money goes back into the system, we're going to call that injections. So we've got leakages, and then in the form of savings, taxes, spending on imports, and injections in the form of investment, government spending, and spending on exports. Okay. I think that's most of what I have to say on the circular flow diagram, so we'll stop there.